This is Labors, and these are the paints I used for Scorpion. I apply some cavalry brown over the base with an airbrush. This airbrush has a 0.2mm needle and I use around 1 part paint, 1 part thinner consistency, and my compressor is at 9 o'clock. I'm covering the surface with small bursts and I make sure I apply the paint nice and evenly throughout the whole base. I apply multiple layers of paint to increase the opacity, and I use small bursts of air from the airbrush to make the drying process a little bit faster. I switch to a brush and I cover the character with 2 to 3 thin layers of vulkan green. I cover all the recesses of the suit, and the only parts that I don't cover are the boots, the gloves and the overpants. Once all the layers are dried, I cover the gloves, boots and overpants with black, because these areas are going to be a darker green compared to the rest of the suit. After that, I use the airbrush again with a mix of night blue and caledor sky. If you don't have night blue, it's pretty similar to Night Lord's blue from the Citadel range. I'm sketching the OSL effect over the left side of the character and all the way down at the bottom of the base. I switch to my 0.50mm airbrush so I can be a little bit more precise, but you can do this with a slightly bigger needle size as well. You know guys, it's not the needle size that matters, it's how you use it. Wink, wink. I start building up my layers at the bottom of the base, like this blue light source is coming from the same direction as I hold the airbrush, so from below. And I go as far as the left shoulder. The reason I'm doing this now is because I have the darkest layer colors on the mini already, and if you want to paint an OSL effect, you will always need your darkest layer colors next to it to be able to highlight the areas next to them. I switch to a brush and I use caledor sky inside my previous layer of blue. I need to accent the direction of the light source, so if the light is coming from the bottom, all the parts of the leg muscles and shoulder that face towards the ground should be highlighted more. The left boot is a darker green, but now I only have some black and blue on them, but that's perfectly fine because the rock under the left boot somewhat blocks the light on the foot, so we don't need to highlight it as much as the rest of the suit. I'm checking my front angle of the character because I want to create a silhouette over the left shoulder and the leg. Like it appears on the picture, I need to align these highlights to have a nice edge highlight over the character. I start highlighting the suit with German camo bright green. I sketch out the main planes of light over the chest, shoulders and head. The design choice with the goggles over the eyes are not my favorite because on the character card Scorpion clearly have some glasses over his eyes, and those have a yellow tint. But now we have some sculpted eyeballs with the frame over the face that represent the glasses. So this might have sounded like a good compromise when designing this mini, but I would much rather have some smooth, solid glass-like shape over the eyes, and I will decide if I want to paint the eyes over that or not, which I will clearly not because I do not think it's very important to see the eyes through the glasses. Like I really like how they designed the shield runners or Dokok, for example. But now here you need to paint the eyes and have this frame around them, which not only looks weird, but completely blocking the brush from highlighting the face decently. Anyway, I try to highlight the top of the skull and the right side of the face. I don't think there is a separation between the suit and the skin, because I think it's a similar case like with Rhino. Scorpion also pretty much molded with his suit. At least this version of him did, so he can't really remove it, so it's basically his second skin. We also have the giant tail coming off from his back, so if you watch the zombie Dokok video, it's going to be a very similar process. So we got a big tentacle which is a bent cylinder shape, so all we need to do is to paint some parallel stripes over it. The only tricky part is that you need to end these stripes in a narrow line to make it look like they are following the shapes of the bent forms. I'm using a base layer consistency to make these highlights opaque as possible and to make these stripes quite straight over the surface. I'm mostly using the side of my brush. For some fine tuning I use the tip, and of course if I make a mistake I can go back with vulkan green to fix things up. With vulkan green, I do go back and highlight the boots, gloves and overpants and revise my shadow areas. I mostly pick out the left side of the boots and gloves to sketch out my highlight areas, and I'm using thin layers. Okay, now comes the blending part. We are going to use a glaze consistency and more layers than Granny needs to wear in the winter. We are going to move the brush from the German camo to the vulkan green layer. Remove the excess paint from your brush, because if I see your paint is pooling heavily over the surface, I will slap on your tiny hand. On the tail, I only blend the bigger highlights to make them a little bit smoother, and I focus more on the torso and the head. The suit looks like it's made of metal, so we need to have smooth surfaces, and we can also communicate that through our blends. I reverse my brush motion with German Camo Pride Green and continue to work on the blends. When you are using a darker value, you will curl back your highlights, so I'm not just working on the blends, but also refining the volumes. The more time you spend on the blends, the better results you will have, but if your highlights are placed well and the shape of them are looking good, then you don't need to go crazy about blending everything for hours and hours. I continue the highlight process of the suit with lime green. I reduce my highlight areas inside the German Camo green layer using some thin layers, and I build up the opacity over time to make the blending process a little bit more easier in the upcoming steps. If you are more comfortable with a thicker consistency, then you can try to do some stippling along the edges of your highlights, but in any case, try to emphasize the forms where you place your highlights. The way I'm building up the layers is pretty similar to the glazing step, because I use the same motion mostly where I want to build up the maximum opacity of the paint, and it's just as important to wait for each layer to dry before applying the next one, like in the blending step. After that, I thin down the paint to a glaze consistency and do some blending all over the mini. If you are looking for a more detailed guide for blending and you are fairly new to painting minis, there is a video on my Patreon page where I describe the process in a very beginner-friendly way over a 32mm base. After that, I paint the eyes with ice yellow, loading up my brush with paint up to the brim and shaping the tip on my hand with a pulling and twisting motion. First, I didn't really like my results, so I grabbed some vulkan green to fix the eyes and did the same process with the teeth as well. Don't get too frustrated if you don't paint perfect eyes on the first try. So with the same method, like I painted the white parts of the eyes, I loaded up my brush up to the brim with black and shaped the tip of my brush and give some direction to the eyes as they are looking to the left. I went back with caledor sky to fine-tune the OSL effect over the back of the head and the jawline with several thin layers to keep the blend smooth like Granny's butt cheek, and I also added more volume to the bottom of the base. I reduced my highlight areas over the gloves and boots with German Camo Bright Green using thin layers, and I also highlighted the left side of the glasses frame to add more detail to these areas. It's interesting that we use the same paints to the suit as well, apart from the lime green, but how much variety you can create with different ratios on the surface with the same values. The reason for this is our mid-tone, the color that is more present simply because it covers more on a specific surface. I make the OSL effect more intense with temple guard blue, and I reduce the highlight areas towards the lower side of the muscles over the side of the character. I'm still checking the angle from the front if the silhouette effect is working or not. I want to see this value all over the shoulder and the side of the face to create this cold light over the character. Using several layers of glaze, I blend in the temple guard blue, moving my brush from the caledor sky layer to the temple guard layer. For my final highlights of the suit, I mixed some ice yellow to the lime green and placed the maximum highlights over the top of the skull, shoulders, pecs and over the top half of the tail. This way we push the contrast a bit more and sacrifice a little bit of saturation. I kinda switch back and forth between a thin layer and the glaze consistency once I have a sketch over the character, but on the tail I'm using a thicker consistency and I'm not blending at all. And that's it guys, Scorpion is ready for the table, and with him we are almost done with all the living and the zombie heroes from the Clash of the Sinister Six box. I hope you guys find this video helpful, and if you're interested in more Marvel Zombies or Massive Darkness 2 PDF guides or full-length video guides, please consider joining my Patreon page. And a special shoutout goes to Cold Valley Dom, Trying to Paint Minis, Jonathan Mosner, Glitchy McCrash, Penoman45 and Michael Kerr. I hope your day will be as smooth as a granny's butt cheek.